Hello and welcome to the next webinar in 12D's training webinar series. My name is Lisa Stewart and I'm the Marketing and Communications Coordinator at 12D Solutions. 12D's training webinars showcase common industry challenges, taking a close look at industry best practices and how these can be implemented using 12D products. The aim of these webinars is to upskill 12D users and broaden their understanding of the capabilities of 12D products. We run these webinars regularly and record them for posting through our website and on YouTube. The previous webinars from this training series, as well as the webinars from our Industry Solutions series, are all available on our YouTube channels if you missed those. While we wait for everyone to finish joining and get comfortable, I'll launch a polling question. You'll have about 30 seconds to answer about your job title, and then I'll show the results. Okay, it looks like most people here are general civil designer, engineer, surveyor types, but we've got quite a few water resources engineers and drainage designers and some road designers. Welcome everyone. Okay, let's get started. During this live presentation, you'll be able to type your questions along the way, as shown on the screen, and we'll answer as many as possible throughout the webinar. At the end, if there's time, I'll read out some of your questions to the presenter. Today's webinar will be presented by Owen Thornton, who has been writing software for 12D Solutions since 2003. Owen has 15 years of professional experience in the civil and mining industries and is the original author of 12D's Drainage Network Editor and the Drainage Analysis module. He's also a 12D specialist in drainage, utilities, plot parameter files, survey conformance, volumetrics, and system setup. Owen has recent consulting experience using 12D model on a variety of large projects. These days, Owen also gives regular 12D training courses in drainage design and macro writing. Today's presentation, Stormwater Drainage Design Fundamentals, Creating Water Networks, is episode 2 in this series, which covers the basic and intermediate aspects of the water modules in 12D Model 14, with special emphasis on the design of stormwater drainage. It is presented as a condensed overview of the material normally covered in the first 2 days of the formal 3 Waters training courses, offered regularly by 12D Solutions. This material is assumed knowledge for many of the more advanced training courses available in the 12D Water suite. A construction-ready drainage model, including catchments, pits, pipes, culverts, channels, and flood extents, is created from scratch in 3D and designed for specified minor and major storm events using the rational method. Output plans, long sections, and calculation tables are also produced. Today's webinar, Creating Water Networks, shows a variety of ways to create and modify water strings to help develop your water network models. It also introduces the Water Network Editor, which is used initially to assign all node and link names, types, and levels, and to label water networks in detail. The Water Network Editor is one of the primary tools of the 3 Waters modules, and its additional capabilities will be showcased in all the remaining episodes of this series. Over to you, Owen.
Thank you, Lisa, and hello, everyone. Yes, welcome to episode 2 of this series, Stormwater Drainage Design Fundamentals. For those of you who might have caught episode 1, it's actually been exactly 1 year since we broadcast episode 1. So hopefully this episode and the remaining probably 4 additional episodes, there'll be 6 in total, hopefully there won't be quite such a big gap between episodes for the remaining episodes. But yes, today we're talking about creating water networks, and following on from episode 1 where we set up our project, we're going to just show some of the tools that we have available in the menu and on the toolbar. Not all of them, but just maybe 9 separate tools here, or 8 separate tools available from the water string menu and the water toolbar. So here's a little presentation here, or slide here, showing the various parts of the menu and which options we'll be looking at roughly in this order. In general, you can do things in any order in 12D, but this is the order I'm going to present things in today. And I might come back and refer to this slide throughout this broadcast. So it's basically the options we're looking at are all on the water string menu, which is under the water main menu. And from there, there's a couple of options that we'll look at in some detail. And also the three sub-menus here off water string, create, plan, edits, and three waters. We'll look at a few of the options on those sub-menus. And just as a handy little reference here, the equivalent options available from the toolbar are also shown sort of with cross-referenced with the numbers here on the left. So I'll try and throughout the episode come back and refer to this to show you where we are to give you a bit of a visual cue there. But from now, I might move on to 12D. And following on from episode 1, this is pretty much the same project that we looked at 1 year ago. Things have moved on slightly. The design has been progressed slightly since last time, and we're using a newer version of version 14. I think in episode 1, it was a very, very early version of 14, and now we're up to the current release version, 14C2F. And in fact, the next version, 14C2G, is imminent. So by the time episode 3 rolls along, I may well be using 14C2G to show you that one. Okay, but here we have our road design combined with a survey. And if I maximize my plan view, I won't go through a review of this because that was done in episode 1. But what I'm interested in doing today is basically showing you a few of the tools we have to create the water strings in our network to begin and create the basic horizontal geometry primarily, and the preliminary vertical geometry as well, and some preliminary labels on our network. And at the same time, introduce the water network editor, which we'll be using for all of the remaining episodes of this series. Okay, so I'm not going to do the whole job here. I'm just going to focus on this portion of the design here that ends up flowing into this proposed basin down the bottom of our design. On the screen at the moment, we've just got the contours of the super tin, which is the combined design and survey. We've got the proposed cadastral boundaries, which are the dashed lines. We've got the road strings in grey, all the design strings in grey, and they've been developed by the design team from the apply MTF functions. And we've also got, if I zoom in a little bit, you can see this cream-coloured cream-coloured sewer network and this blue-coloured water network. And these are services, other services in this job that I'm going to need to avoid or at least be aware of as I design my stormwater network to suit this job. Okay, so I've got them on the screen as well. In addition, I've got these two orange lines with arrowheads on them. And this is an example of a little bit of preliminary CAD work that might have been done, where you can see these lots with the grey rectangles in them. They've been identified as all the lots that are grading away from the roads they're connected to. And so we're proposing a little bit of rear of allotment drainage or roof drainage just to pick up the runoff from the roofs there. So you could imagine that there would be gutters on the roofs that are connected to downpipes that will be picked up by this proposed orange, the proposed orange lines here. And so we're going to develop water strings from these orange strings, as well as creating the rest of the network from scratch. So the first, just recapping quickly what we did in episode 1, bringing up the water string menu from the water main menu. Just hover right on water string there and click on water string where it's in square brackets there. And we also have, so pretty much everything we'll be doing is under the create, or under this water string menu, and under create, and under plan edits, and under the three waters tools, okay? We also have the water toolbar. And this water toolbar in a default workspace, I believe it shows up down the bottom left here, but I've simply pulled it out and placed it up the top there to be a little bit more prominent. And we have access to all of these. They're all, if you hold your mouse down on each of these, you get a little drop down for various things like water network, water string, water drainage, and we get into the more advanced options in the water, three waters options, which are the 2D, stuff and things like that. But we're not covering everything today. We're just looking at a handful of options within this water string menu and within the water toolbar. And we're going to start off with item number 1, which was to create a string. Okay, and that is simply under create, or I can go to the water string toolbar, hold it down and go to the icon with a little starburst on it to create a water string. Okay, and it pops up this panel. Now, all of the strings I'm going to create in my model, and it's the model we set up in episode 1 called SW. So I may as well put the model name in there straight away. SW for Stormwater, and I believe it's already loaded on the view that we're using here, which is also called Stormwater. But every one of the strings I'm going to create is going to be from the same network, and I'm going to nominate a name for that network. I'm going to call it Network A. So all of my strings are going to start with the letter A, and they'll have some kind of numeric suffix. That's the convention I'm going to follow today. You can make your own convention or follow your own convention, but just to be clear, all the strings, I'm going to start with the letter A. The string naming is important in the 12D water models because the string naming affects the node naming as well in one way or another. Okay, oftentimes the string name forms part of the node name. So it's worthwhile making sure all of the strings in your model, in your water model, are uniquely named and that they make some kind of coherent sense depending on the kind of network you're talking about or the kind of model you're talking about. So everyone's different, I suppose, but I'm going to start off with the trunk line of this network, and I like to call my number my trunk line 0. So I'm going to call my first string A0. Okay, we're going to put this string in the Stormwater model, and I'm going to use a different color here other than this default white, which has just been picked up from the CAD control bar at the top here. Instead, I'm going to type in the prefix of the color I want. It's in the PPF group or plot parameter file group, and you might wonder why I'm doing that. But if I type in PPF and then hit Control D, that will go through my colors file and list just the colors in the colors list that start with the letters PPF. Now, they're primarily used for plot parameter files here, but I quite like this color PPF Design Drainage because as well as being a nice bright orange color on screen, when it comes time to plot the strings out, they automatically map to a nice thick black pen on a drawing sheet. And so it's the best of both worlds. Looks good on the screen, looks good on a drawing. I don't have to think about it. Okay, the flow direction setting here is in many ways the most important setting to understand, and it's a little bit unique to 12D because all strings in 12D have a string direction, which is the direction of increasing chainage from start chainage to end chainage, or from left to right in a profile, if you like. But 12D water strings have the option where you can specify the flow direction, and that can be the same as the string direction or opposite to the string direction. Okay, and it largely, whichever way you choose depends on how you like your long sections to appear. If you like your long sections to fall in the direction of chainage, in other words, they start at the upstream end and flow to the downstream end, you would go with the same as string direction option. And if you instead wanted them to flow opposite, in other words, you wanted your long section to show the outlet on the left and the top or the upstream end on the right-hand side, you would go with opposite to. Now, there's various conventions adopted throughout Australia even and around the world, but it's probably the predominant one in Australia for stormwater would be same as, apart from Victoria where they tend to go with opposite to as far as I know. But look, you can choose whichever one you like. If it were personally up to me, I would choose the opposite to string direction for all cases, whether it was stormwater, sewer, or what have you. But that's just my personal preference. It really doesn't matter that much, but it's probably going to be a good idea for all of the strings in your model to go with the same option, whether it's same as or opposite to. Now, today I'm going to go with the same as option, which means that, first of all, my long sections will fall from left to right. And it also means that when I draw my water strings, I should start them at the upstream end and draw from upstream to downstream. Okay? Other than that, if we get it wrong at any time, we can fix it. It's not like you have to completely start again if you make it wrong. And in fact, I might try and make a couple of little mistakes along the way so I can show you how you can fix your mistakes along the way. At the same time as creating the water string, though, you can nominate two tins, a finished surface tin and a natural surface tin. And these will be automatically linked to your water string so that the water string knows where its finished surface and natural surface is in relation to its horizontal geometry. I've already got the finished surface tin filled in. It was one of my defaults, but I'll nominate the survey tin at the same time. The purpose is defaulting to stormwater here, and I'm doing stormwater design, so I'll leave it like that. But the purpose is if you nominate a particular one of these particular options there, when it comes time to nominate node types and link types, you can get a reduced list that are only appropriate for, say, stormwater or whichever of the three waters you happen to be setting it for. So that it doesn't do a whole lot there, but it does help a little bit. Then there's these two tick boxes, use node connection points and many strings. Well, I'll explain what node connection points are a little bit later. For now, in the early stages, there's no great benefit in turning them on. There's no real harm in turning them on either, but I'm going to leave them off for now and I'll come back and introduce them. As it happens, because we created this stormwater model back in episode 1 with a water model template, that water model template has already been set to turn these connection points on anyway. So the fact that I've got them off here, they will automatically get turned on once I use the network editor to edit this model. Okay, and I am about to create more than one string, so I'm going to tick on many strings, and that simply means that after I finish creating the first string, I'll get this panel popping back up again, ready to create another string. Okay, with the panel filled in now, I simply hit create, and this pops up the water edit menu, otherwise known as the water string editor. Okay, and this is your main option here for creating new or adding or deleting nodes in your water network, or even for moving nodes. But to be honest, there's a whole lot of options in this water string menu. I really don't use it for much other than what's in the edits menu here. That's to add, append a node or move a node, insert a node, and extend and maybe add a radius to a pipe if there needs to be a pipe curvature in the link, I should say. But other than that, other than the save and finish and possibly if I was doing sewer design, the house connections and controls, I don't use this water string editor or the water edit option for very much at all other than what's under the edits menu here. Today, I'm just going to use one or two of the options under edits. It's mainly going to be this add append node. Okay, now as soon as I select add or append node, it pops up the water services defaults panel. Now this is the same as the water string defaults that we see from the water string menu, or it's the same panel you get from the water string defaults here on the toolbar here with the raindrop with the two ticks. Okay, now this was already set up in episode 1, and in fact it's all set up ready for me to go here. It's basically going to say that for the string I'm about to create, all of the nodes will be created with this special SAG type, an SAL2E, which is a small lintel lip-in line configuration for barrier curb, which I explained in detail in episode 1. We're using the Brisbane City Council or BCC drainage.4d file, which has this list of node types and link types, and that's used primarily through most parts of Queensland. Okay. It's generally not appropriate for other parts of the world, but it is a real example, as opposed to the default drainage.4d installed with 12d, which is just a generic file that really isn't applicable to anyone in the world. It's just a generic example. Okay, so we set all that up in episode 1, and in fact, I do want to leave it as this SAG node because the first line I'm going to create, I'm going to define a line from the SAG that I've got in my cul-de-sac here, working down this easement, and there's a swale built in this easement here, picking up 2 sags along the way. I'm also going to pick up this roof drainage system that I described earlier, which I haven't even got as water strings yet. They're just these CAD strings or super strings, and ultimately discharge all of this out to my stormwater basin here somewhere. That'll be my discharge point into the basin. Okay, so that's the plan. Each link or pipe in the string will be given a default diameter of 375 millimeters. There'll be a minimum grade of 1 in 200 or 0.5%, a minimum cover of 600 millimeters, and I'm using a default pipe class or pipe type of 4, which is straight from the Humes catalog, rubber ring joint, reinforced concrete pipe class 4. Okay, that's what that means. So I don't actually need to change anything here, but it pops up automatically every time you go to append, just as a convenience really to remind you, hey, do you want to change your defaults? In this case, I don't, so I'm just going to hit the Finish tab and go immediately to the top or upstream end of the proposed line that I'm about to create. Now, the only definitive thing I know about where I want to start this node at this point is this red marker line that is marking the sag. Okay, it's much more important at this stage to get the longitudinal placement along the curb line of your road pits accurate than it is to get the lateral placement. So I just know I want to be on somewhere on this red line. Later on, once we establish a link between our water network and our road design strings, we will be able to place the nodes exactly where they're supposed to be built. Historically, a lot of people have just placed the nodes on the set out point, which might have been the lip of curb or the invert of curb. But in truth, this node, the center of this node, to be accurately placed where it's supposed to be built, we don't actually have one of these gray design strings representing where the center of the node is. So all we know is it's going to be somewhere on this sag, and I'm just going to do a segment snap on that sag marker that we generated in episode 1. Okay, so far so good. Moving downstream then, I want to go down the middle of, well, somewhere down within the easement here between the 2 dashed lines we can see. And I'm also being careful to avoid the sewer line here, which is a proposed sewer line that is in parts running parallel to my stormwater network. But what I want to do for the second node here is create a manhole probably, but it'll still be a sag for now, but I'll change it to a manhole later, that's going to pick up the 2 incoming roof drainage lines here. So I'm going to make sure I snap right on the very end of one of these roof drainage lines in order to place my next node. Okay, so that's placed another. It looks like a sag pit still, or a rectangular pit. Ultimately, we'll change it a bit later on. So that's the second node in place. The third node, well, at this stage, I'd like to go straight to the sag pit, but I'm not going to be able to do that because that's going to take me outside my easement boundary. So I'm probably, unfortunately, going to need another structure along the way, and probably somewhere in this vicinity here, just near the bottom of the easement, and I'll just do a cursor snap there for now. If it turns out to be too close to the sewer line or not in quite the right spot, I can always adjust it later. At this stage, I'm just looking at the basic horizontal geometry. Okay, again, continuing on, I'm going to snap on to the red marker line there, and it doesn't really matter at this stage exactly where you do it, just somewhere on that red line. I'm going to shoot across the road here to the other side of the road, to the other sag marker. And then from this point, I want to get my final node for the A0 trunk line of this network. And I don't know exactly where to place the head wall on this batter slope. And I won't know until I've got some levels established on this string. For now, though, I'm just going to use the alignment of one of these red lines so that I get a nice straight line across the road here. And I'm just going to right-click to bring up the PickOps menu, select Intersection, and I'm going to intersect this line on the batter slope here with one of these red marker lines from my sag labels. Okay, and that's placed and calculated the intersection of those 2 segments. I hit Escape to cancel the append, and that's all I'm using the string editor for the first string. Okay, basic geometry. Save and finish, yes. And it immediately pops up the Create Water String menu again, ready for me to create the next string. And surprise, surprise, I'm going to call it A1. It's the next numerical number in my A network. Okay, but other than that, it's going to be set up exactly the same way. I just go ahead and hit create, and I'm back to the water string editor, this time for creating string A1. And I'm going to go exactly the same again, add append node from the edits menu, add append node. I'm not changing my defaults because the next string is going to take us from these two sags up here on its road C, I believe, and somehow make our way down to connect into this node from the trunk line, okay? And we'll have to figure out the best way to do that. But I'm going to start at the upstream end, and it just so happens that these two are sags, and it's probably going to be the most common node type in my on this particular string, so I'll leave that node type set as the SAL2E. Okay, again, I'm going to do a similar thing. I'm going to snap to the red sag markers here, and this is an approximate location of where this center of the node should be for these particular node types. And then how to turn the corner then, because I do need to keep my pipes in the road reserve here, but I also want to be mindful of the sewer line and the water line here in cream and blue respectively, and I don't want to sort of design a string on top of that. It can cross it, but I don't want to cross it at a very acute angle or anything like that. Okay, so there's various rules that various councils will have here. Some places will say, well, you can't put manholes in the roadway, and some places say they'd rather you not put manholes in the verge or under footpaths or whatever. So today I'm just going to make a decision and say, well, it's preferable to place the manholes in the roadway. Now, again, there's lots of different ways you could achieve a design like this to get point A down to point B, if you like. And I'm just going to show you one possible way. And so all I'm going to do is just roughly by eye, I'm trying to keep the pipe here within the road reserve. Okay, so I want to avoid this dashed cadastral boundary. And I want to also just place what's going to become a manhole in the middle of the lane, of the trafficable lane here. And I'm just going to do it roughly by eye for now. So I'm just going to do a cursor snap in the middle of the lane there without measuring anything accurately. That'll be good enough for now, and continue on. Again, I'll need to come back and change it to a circular manhole. At the moment, it's still going to be created as a sag node. Okay. Again, I want to ultimately turn the corner here and make my way down to this one, but I'm going to need at least one other node before doing that because I'm going outside of the road reserve there. And where to place the node, where you could pick a point midway between this one and this one on the curb somewhere. But given that this one is a sag here and the road gets very, very flat in this portion of the design, it's probably better to make the node that you do need probably closer to the downstream sag than the upstream manhole. We certainly don't need an inlet here because we're very close to the crest on that curb return. So you could place an inlet on the curb there rather than a manhole in the lane, but it's not going to capture much flow. In fact, it's mainly going to collect dirt more than anything. So I would try to avoid placing your nodes near crests if possible. But given that we're going to probably have a roof drainage system here, and there's likely to be a roof there that's got a downpipe that's connected to the curb, my thinking is I would like to use this cadastral boundary here and maybe one of the curb strings to create or define the position of the next node. And this will be an on-grade inlet node to pick up some of the flow coming down the road here. So I'm simply going to bring up the pickups menu by clicking on the right mouse button and selecting intersection. And I'm going to intersect that cadastral boundary with, let's say, the back of my curb right there. And that's calculated the intersection for me. From here, I'm going to continue on. And really, this is the only node in this string, A1, that I'm going to be quite careful about. I'm about to form a junction between two drainage strings here, or two water strings, I should say. It's very important to form a junction that you need to get that diamond snap or point snap exactly on top of the center of the node that you want to connect into. If you are more than a micron out, it's not going to form the junction correctly. It will still create the node, but it won't connect into the other string. So make sure you get that diamond point snap. before you do the final accept with the middle mouse button. And then we've successfully formed a junction. I'm going to hit escape to cancel the append, and that's the extent of my line A1. So I can save and finish there. Next one is A2. I'll go through this pretty quickly. Create, edits, add append, just like before, but this time I'm about to create two more nodes that are going to connect in to what's going to become the manhole here. Two more very short strings here, and they're both going to be on-grade pits rather than sag pits. So it's a good opportunity for me to change my node type here to be an ordinary AL2E, which is the on-grade version. Other than that, the defaults will stay as they are. Finish, edits, add append node. I'd already initiated that, silly me. So I can simply now remember from episode 1, we had this marker string that we created at the upstream of the intersection. I'm just going to accept that. And I want to connect that one to my manhole in the middle of the lane here. Again, make sure you get that diamond point snap. Accept and escape. Save and finish. We're done with line A2 now, and we're going to do the final string in this main part of the road network, A3. And here I'm going to do something a little bit interesting. I'm going to make a mistake deliberately. And I'm going to go create, edits, add append node. I'm going to accept these on-grade defaults, but I'm going to not pay attention deliberately here. And I'm going to draw the string instead of from upstream to downstream, from downstream to upstream. Okay, so I'm going to get that diamond snap onto where the manhole will be. And I'm just going to snap onto, just roughly, onto the back of my curb string there. Okay, and save and finish like so. Okay, so it's popped up the create water string ready to create a new string, but I'm not going to use this panel anymore. I'm done creating all the strings from scratch. I still need to convert these arrowed orange strings into water strings as well, but I'm going to do that with a different tool. For now though, if I just restore my view and show the section view as well, let's just have a look at what we've just created in section view. I'm going to profile my line A0, and I might change the exaggeration on my section view here to 5 times. And it's put in some default grading, which is probably not too bad for most of the network here, apart from the outlet maybe, because it's trying to maintain a certain amount of cover there rather than letting this pipe daylight into a head wall as it's supposed to. So there's a little bit of work there, but that's the line A0 and line A1 and line A2 and then line A3. If I zoom right in there, there's not much to tell me that I made a mistake at this early stage. It's telling me the pipe grade is 0.5% and a positive grade is downhill, okay? But it's downhill. As I move my mouse in the section view, you can see the corresponding crosshair. That is, at this early stage, the only real clue that we've got that I've drawn the string in the wrong direction. Okay, so I'm going to fix this in just a sec. I'll just momentarily go back to the PowerPoint and show that, well, what I've just shown there is option 1, and along the way we looked at the water string defaults as well, option 2, okay, there and there in the menu, okay? But we're now going to look at options 3 and 4, which are those 2 options. They're available under the 3 Waters Tools menu, and between the 2 of these options here, we will be able to sort out any possible problem we may have in our water network in terms of the string direction and the flow direction, okay? So I've just had a quick look at this and said, oh, look, I've drawn this in the wrong direction. Okay, the 2 options we're talking about here under the 3 Waters Tools are the reverse string direction and the set flow directions. Okay, now this reverse strings is actually just the standard reverse strings panel that's duplicated under the 3 Waters menu. This works on any old string to reverse it. This set flow directions is unique to the water menu though. Okay, again, it's also available under the water string menu there. There's the reverse strings and flow directions options right there. So for the reverse strings and the flow directions, what we're talking about here is two different directions, a string direction and a flow direction. So with two different kinds of directions, there's four logical possibilities in the way every string can be set, okay? And only one of the four logical cases is correct and the other three are incorrect. So between these two panels here, no matter what mistake you've made, you'll be able to fix it up with these two as a combination possibly. So in this case, I'm just going to pick on the one string that I know to be drawn in the wrong string direction, and on the target box, say replace existing data and reverse that string, come down to the section view, and suddenly it is now profiling in the direction that I want it from upstream to downstream. But there's a little bit of a snag there. It's still saying that this string is 0.5%, plus 0.5%. And that is saying that the flow is going from right to left, right? But I want it to go from left to right. Okay, and that means in the process of reversing the string, we've also flipped the flow direction of this string. And I want all of the strings in my stormwater model to be same as rather than opposite to the string direction. The flow direction is for all of the strings in my model is to be same as string direction. So if I go ahead and run the set drainage flow directions panel now, it will tell me one of four drainage strings modified, only one in fact. And if I hit the lightning bolt to refresh the view, the invert levels haven't changed because it didn't regrade the string, but suddenly it tells me, hey, my grade is negative 0.5%, which is uphill, which is, well, whilst it's not correct, it's meant to be downhill, it is at least giving me the right sign for the invert levels as they are at the moment. So just a little bit on the reverse string and flow direction options there as well. Okay, so that is all I wanted to show you about creating strings from scratch, but I also want to convert these two strings, and there's another option again on the Water Create menu called Create from Strings, option 5 on this slide. Back in 12D under Create from Strings. It's also available on the toolbar just underneath the Create option. There's this one, Create from Strings. Okay, and this one I'm just going to select the strings that I want. These two orange strings are both in the same model, which is called Stormwater Rear Lots 1 meter offset. It's just possibly something that was done in CAD as polylines and imported into 12D. It should be roughly a constant 1 meter offset from the cadastral boundary in most of these instances. And I simply want to convert these two strings to water strings. I may as well nominate the finished surface tin along the way. I want the same flow direction as all my other strings. I'm going to create them in the stormwater model. I'm not going to worry about tolerances because these two strings are snapped onto each other quite nicely. And I certainly don't want to clean out the drainage model because I've already put a whole lot of water strings in my model already. Okay, the only thing that I need to be careful of now is that these two water strings are going to be created with the default node types and link types. So before I proceed, I'm going to go back to the water string defaults and reset them because this roof drainage system is not going to be using these road pits and concrete pipes. Instead, I'm going to nominate inspection pits. If I scroll down a bit, I've got a node type in here called insp pit for inspection pit, which is suitable for a little concrete inspection pit in the backyard of these lots. And I'm probably going to go allow much smaller pipes, probably as small as a 150 in some cases, probably a little bit less covered. They typically can be a little shallower, these pipes, and they're typically PVC pipes of one type or another, but this UPVC, unplasticized PVC SN2, is a particular type that has been designed and catalogued for stormwater systems. So that's the option I'm going to choose for the pipe type there. And so all of the node types and link types will be as seen here when I go and convert these super strings with the arrows on them into water strings. Okay. So I just go ahead and hit the process button there, and I can take the original model off the view, the stormwater rear lots 1 meter offset. That was the CAD strings. And I now have this roof drainage system in place as well. Okay, now I did show you the invert levels of the pipes when we created the strings from scratch. They looked pretty good. They used the default grading parameters and the default cover and all of that to set some default inverts. When we converted these CAD strings, though, to water strings, whatever levels that they had on the original CAD strings or super strings would have been interpreted as invert levels. And so if I look in the profile view now at some of these had crazy invert levels way down at 25 meters, which is way, way deeper than it should have. Why 25, I'm not sure. Okay, and it's where it's connected in on line A0, it's also wreaked a little bit of havoc there. And what I'm going to show you next is give you an introduction to, now that we've got the main geometry of our network in place, I'm going to introduce you to the water network editor. Okay, and again, that's third option down on the water string menu, or it's always the first icon on the water toolbar as well. And this water network editor, it's a very big panel, and I'm certainly not going to cover all of it in this broadcast today, but I did want to show you a few things. Basically, the water network editor in this version of 14, it's changed its appearance a little bit in that the section at the top here used to be part of the section at the bottom. This section at the top is now a navigation section for navigating around your water network. The bottom section I refer to as the control section. And the midsection, which is the same as it's always been, is a whole lot of tabs in there. Okay, and I'll explain all this in a little bit more detail, but to get you started, to use this water network editor, you need to pick on a water network somewhere. There's a pick edit button, but it's already active. You don't even need to press it. You can simply just jump on a node somewhere, and I might jump on the top of my line A0 there. Okay. Now, the first time you do this, you may get a prompt like this. Without explaining it in too much detail, I'm going to say, as a designer, if you're aware of what drainage.4d you're using, please let the drainage.4d update your strings for you. It's going to save you a lot of time and hassle. So every time you see a prompt like this as a designer, tick on the tick box and say update from drainage.4d. Okay, now that loads the entire water model into the network editor now, and we've got 3 different ways that we can move around. We can just keep on pressing pick edit and jumping from node to node here, and you can see that it highlights in the both the section view and the plan view the current node, and I could jump on back onto our road network over there. Or I could use the arrows here, the go to next and go to previous node, and that will allow me to move and loop through the entire network that we've created so far. But I do have a third option as well for moving around, and this is this little go to pit, and it's a little drop down arrow here, and at the moment it just says, it lists all of the links or pipes in our network, but they're just called X to X or X to X2, X to X3, because we haven't named our nodes and we haven't named our links. Okay, so before I do anything, I want to assign some names because they've all got the default name X at the moment. Okay, now I'll just profile a string there as well. This brings us down to the control section. So before I give this panel a formal introduction, I just want to get some basics covered. Okay, I'm just going to introduce the set node names to get me started here. And that pops up this sub-panel of the network editor. And from my water model template from the episode 1, this has already been established. And this is the naming convention I want to adopt. I'm not going to go into the details of the different ways you can name your nodes. This one's just going to prefix each node with the string name and give it a number there with a hyphen separator. Okay, I'm naming both the pits and the pipes, or the nodes and the links, and I just hit run, and suddenly I can see the node names showing up on my plan view. I'll go back to editor. While I'm down here in the control section though, at this early stage, there's a couple of other buttons that are worthwhile hitting here. Set node details and regrade pipes. Okay, because I know I've got some crazy invert levels in my design so far, and I'm not too concerned about that because the network editor already knows about some basic parameters that we've set in our defaults for how to grade a network in terms of minimum grade, minimum cover, minimum drop through the structures and things like that. So I'm just going to press Set Node Details and Regrade Pipes. And again, if you're ever in doubt about these two buttons, I've got a little piece of advice that I give to all 12D users who are using the network editor. If in doubt whether to press these two buttons, my advice is to press them. If in doubt, press the button, Set Node Details or Regrade Pipes. What that has gone and done is it has gone and assigned and graded the entire network based on the rules that we've currently told it about. And it's resolved all those issues with the funny invert levels. If I look at line A3, it's now grading the correct way. It's now got a positive downhill grade of 0.5%. And my roof drainage system, the lines AR1 and lines AR2 are also have got decent invert levels. And at this early stage, I can also now come over to the perspective view and add the stormwater model on there. Now, when you're working with translucent tins, as I have in this perspective view, it's a good idea every time you add a new model onto your perspective view to just go to the View Zone menu there, hover right on Models, and bring your translucent tin to the front of the view. So Models to front, and I'll double click on the super tin there, and now I can see through the tin correctly and see everything underneath. And we can see the beginnings of our network there. Now, everything's a sag pit at the moment, but we've even got details such as grates and lintels beginning to appear because they're encoded into the definition of the sag pit. Okay, so at the push of a couple of buttons here, Set Node Details and Regrade Pipes, all it's really done is updated the model based on the basic rules we've already given it on how to grade a network. It's not perfect yet, but it's gotten rid of all the crazy numbers that we had when we first created it. Okay. At this early stage too, without sort of introducing how all the tabs work and everything, just to know that there's a big section of tabs here. The only other thing I would probably do at this stage is I mentioned node connection points, and there is on the global main tab of the network editor. And again, all of these global and defaults tabs here have been pre-configured via a water model template from episode 1, and that's also why we're seeing the method here set to rational. By default, if we hadn't had a water model template, it would say none. Okay, but we now have on the global main tab, I could choose momentarily at least to turn off these node connection points or turn them back on. What difference it makes, for instance, is, let me just take those sag markers off the view for a moment. If I toggle on the vertices on my stormwater model, I currently see a vertex, not just at the center of every node, but also where every pipe connects in. If I turn this Use Node Connection Points off on the Global Main tab and hit Set Node Details, oops, it's jumped me away there. Sorry, that wasn't a great demo. Suddenly, it gets rid of those connection points and all the pipes just intersect through the center of the node. Okay, now, ultimately, if you're doing a detailed design here, you'll probably want those Use Node Connection Points on. But in this early stage, it can often be easier to have those node connection points off. Okay, so I'll leave it at that for now and we'll come back and turn them on quickly. I am running a little over time here. Okay, so that's a little bit of an introduction to the network editor. I was going to introduce the split and join and the move. I'll just do this very, very quickly before just wrapping things up on a little bit about the water network editor. Okay, so I'll do that next because at this point, let's close down the network editor and I might simplify things a little bit by just cloning this stormwater view. I hit the clone button there, which is this one, which has given me a new view called Stormwater Copy. And I might just take off some of the detail here. I don't really want a lot of this detail. I'm just leaving the stormwater model that I've just created and the super tin, which shows the purple contours there. Okay, and I might even toggle off my string names So that's under string text. Go to the toggle icon, toggle off the string names, the string text, and I'll toggle on the string names. Okay, so this is showing me all the string names, A0, A1, etc. But there may come a time where someone like your verifier or your design manager will come along and say, I don't like the way you've strung together your network and I want you to restring it a different way. I don't want this A0 to be your trunk line, for instance. I want, for instance, this A1 to be the trunk line. So I'll do a very quick demo here. Again, it's under the plan edits string split join. And this is the only option in 12D that can split and join water strings. And a very quick demo, I want to split my string A0 here. And I want to give the upstream portion of that string a new name called A3. So I'm simply going to do that, hit the split button, and split at this node here. It should say split successful, and I now have a new string A3 and a little portion of my original A0 there, and that's A3. Okay, so that's as we want it. And I now want to join this little portion of A0 to the remaining, or what was originally our A1 string, to make a single A0 string there. So we're not actually changing anything technically. We're just restringing the network. It's still the same network, just restrung in a different way. So here I'm going to use the join downstream to upstream. Critically, I want the first string you pick out of the two that you're going to join dictates the name and the color of the join string. And I've already got this downstream portion named the way I want it. So I'm simply going to click join downstream to upstream, click on the downstream portion, select accept, click on the upstream portion, select accept. And that's really all I'm going to do with the split and join drainage strings option there. It's a simple little demonstration of how it works, but I've simply restrung my entire network now by doing that. Okay, if I go back to my regular view now, I'll get rid of that stormwater copy. And I might just zoom in here. One thing I wanted to do on the network editor quickly, back to the network editor, and I'll jump to the top of my line here, which is now, it still says A11. Okay, so there's a little bit of housekeeping after restringing and joining. This line is showing up in the navigation section here. It's line A0, and in fact, this one is now meant to be line A1. I'll change the string names of the other two little lines here as well while I'm here. I'll just use the pick edit button to quickly change the string names. This one's meant to be A2. Okay, so I've now got line A0, A1, A2, and A3, as well as the original roof drainage, which are unchanged. I need to now quickly update all of their names. And the housekeeping I'm talking about is just simply coming down to the bottom here and running all the same buttons that we ran before. Set node names, it's all set up, hit the run button, and it's now gone and reallocated the names based on the new string names. Back to editor. Again, if in doubt, press the button, set node details, regrade pipes. Okay, and they're the only buttons we've pressed so far. But you may also, after getting the node names right and the string names right, you may want to loop through your network from top to bottom here, go to the arrows, and simply set the node type. So I'll do this quickly. Most of them are going to be set correctly. There's only a handful that we'll need to change. So from A01, that's meant to be a sag. Go to next pit. Go to next pit. This one's meant to be a manhole, A03. I'll just change that there. A manhole 1050 will do. Moving on, this one's meant to be an on-grade pit, an AL2E. Moving on, that one's a sag, that one's a sag. The outlet here is meant to be a head wall. I'm going to just go to this head wall out auto, or I could, and that presets the particular head wall outlet as with a whole bunch of settings. If you don't like those particular settings, they're probably a pretty good default, but you can change it back to the head wall, ordinary head wall out, and that frees up those settings that it sets, allowing you to change them. At no time have I been hitting apply though, because this push button at the bottom is auto applying my changes. So as I have been moving around the network here, the nodes have automatically been changing. Like my manhole has changed to a circular node, and my head wall no longer has a little rectangular structure on it. It's going to ultimately have a trapezoidal head wall on it, and things like that. So you don't need to hit apply as long as this auto apply push button is on. Okay, continuing my loop through the network though. This one's meant to be on grade. That one's correct. That one's correct. Now we're coming down the swale here. That one's meant to be a sag. This one's meant to be a manhole 1050, as is the next one, manhole 1050. And I believe we're now into the roof drainage, and all the roof drainage system has got inspection pit and this UPVC type, so they're all correct. So that's all I've really done there. Again, if in doubt, hit the button, set node details, regrade pipes. And I'm now, just to wrap things up, I was going to show the move pit, and I can do it so quickly that I may as well, because if I wanted to say now move this junction node, for instance, let's say I was too close to that cadastral boundary or didn't quite like the position of it. Because it's a junction of 3 different strings, I could do 3 separate string edits just by pressing F6 and bringing up the string editor for each one of these strings, but that would require me to do it 3 times. Instead, I'm going to use this little option here. This is under the water string menu. It's the first option, called Move Nodes and Vertices. Also under Plan Edits, it's just called Move. Okay? And this little option is great. It's actually a very generic option. You'll also find it under Strings, Points Edit, Move. It's a very useful option, and it's great for junction nodes on water networks. Okay, because these 2 little tick boxes mean that it will only, if I select a node in the model, it will only move something else that's in that model, but it will move all of the nodes with the same coordinate. So it means if I choose to move this node, for instance, I can say, well, I could probably get it a little bit closer to that cadastral boundary. Let's say I wanted to move just a slight change there, but let's say I wanted to get it precisely in the middle of the lane. At this point, I could initiate a snaps CAD point midpoint and digitize, say, 2 points across the road there, and you can see it wherever I move my mouse, it's highlighting the midpoint between the first point and my mouse. So if I snap onto the opposite lane there, I'm getting the midpoint of the lane precisely. It doesn't look like the other nodes have moved yet until I do the final accept, and now all nodes have moved there. I may also want to ensure I get a perpendicular lateral here. I could do the same thing for this node. And so I want to move that node, and I want to be perpendicular, right-click to bring up pickups, perpendicular to the back of curb, and then snap on the manhole, and that ensures I get a perfectly perpendicular lateral coming into that manhole. Okay, so a couple of little examples of how you could use the move point panel there. Very, very good for moving junctions especially, but it can also move the connection points. If we turn the connection points on, which I won't do today, it will sort that one out as well. Okay, so just to finish up then, I'm going to jump us back into the network editor just for a little bit of a recap here. And after a while, I get a little bit tired of looking at just the node labels here, and I'd like a little bit more information just to prove that I'm modeling things the way I think I am. So I might just tidy up my view a little bit here. I'm going to take off the crossing service models. I might take off the stormwater markers like so. And I might also toggle off the node names here. So I'm going to have to go to the toggle icon and string text and just right click on the word view there and change it from view to off. So I no longer see the node labels, because once I've got my network pretty much established to this level, I might actually toggle off the vertices as well. View. So I no longer see those cyan crosses. But the last thing I wanted to show you to wrap up today was the plot button. And you can label your networks from this plot button on the network editor. using a water plan plot PPF and a drainage or water long section PPF. And so it's really very, very customizable. These ones I've got in my customer library here are pretty much copies of the ones that are installed in the library here. So I've copied some ones out of our library and put them in my customer library for this course because I've modified them slightly. Okay, but they're really good examples, the ones in the library, to have a look at. And I'll just focus on the plan plot. I'll generate the long section as well without showing it. But hitting the plot button here, it's going to label your stormwater model into a new model called Stormwater Labels. And without going into the details, I'll just close down that panel and maximize my view here. Just to finish up, I can see rather than just having the node names, I've now got details such as flow arrows and lintels and set out points are showing up, and pipe sizes, pipe lengths, pipe grades, a lot more information than just the node names. Now that particular plot parameter file has already been set up with a rotation on the text as well, and that's implying to me that this whole view could be rotated, and we're going to set up drawing plot frames for this, and you can do that easily from the properties panel here. I think that's a rotation of 40 degrees from memory, so I can rotate my entire view if I wish under the viewport panel here and set a rotation angle of 320, or that's the bearing, I think. And that rotates my view so that the node labels are upright, and that may well be the final orientation of our drawing. So it makes sense to label things the way they're going to end up on the drawing. Now, this particular plot set of plot labels is not become finished product yet. Once we start using the network editor some more to link in drainage string, to link in services and catchments and design strings and all of that sort of thing in bypass models, more and more information will appear. And after we run water through it and run the analysis, we'll get more and more all the hydrology, the flow rates, and all of that sort of thing appearing as well. Okay, so this is just a preliminary setup, but in that hour that I've spent, I know I've gone a bit over time, I apologize. We've created this, pretty much this entire network A, just in a preliminary sense, but ready to start doing some serious analysis on it. Okay, so apologies for going a little bit over time, but I'd now like to take us open up the webinar to any questions and answers we had while I was talking.
Thanks for that, Owen. Yes, we have got a few questions through from today's session. I'll just pick a few to run through quickly here. Josie in New South Wales wanted to clarify whether the water string is the equivalent of the drainage network editor in versions earlier than 12D Model 14.
Yeah, there was a name change. It's just the name of the string has changed, and look, they're almost interchangeable, but we're now trying to name what was previously known as the drainage string is now the water string. Okay, so it's just this particular one string type. It's all the same string type. It's just changed its name. And yes, the drainage network editor is now known as the water network editor. It's still the same tool, just with a different name. We've also changed the names of pits and pipes, the terminology there, to nodes and links. So, and you'll still find parts of 12D where we haven't yet changed the wording, or we're unable to change the wording. We're still playing catch up ourselves. So yes, that's partly why this series is presented in 14, because this is where the change has happened. It's all happened in version 14 compared with version 12.
Okay, thank you. And David in Queensland has asked, how do you create culverts and channels as water strings?
Yeah, well, the good news is on that one, and I'll just jump back into the project there. I have only focused on the pit and pipe here just for time constraints. There is an option to this particular job does require some culverts and channels, in fact. And the good news is that modeling culverts and channels, they're just like, in many ways, they're just like any other water string, okay? There are a few extra details, and the grading of them is a little bit more complicated. But I think by the time episode 3 comes along, I'm going to show a more completed stormwater model in that episode, and I'll highlight the pertinent differences between, say, culvert and channel systems versus pit and pipe systems. But effectively, though, the tools that I've shown you today in episode 2 are all the same tools that you'll be using to create culverts and channels. There's just a few subtle, detailed differences that are, to be honest, we haven't got to that level of detail in this series yet. So I've held off on showing them.
Okay, thanks. And we'll just do one more live, I think. Ben in Victoria would like to know, when should pit connection points be turned on or off?
Yeah, now that is an interesting question, and it's to do with that one tick box that I showed earlier on the network editor on the global main tab. Is whether you should should you turn them on and when should you turn them off. Some people will say always have them on. Some people will say always have them off. It does boil down to preference. I find, especially when you're dealing with nodes of zero size, such as a head wall, or in fact, when you're doing culvert and channel modeling, when the nodes have zero size, I find that there's very little benefit to having the connection points on. And in fact, certain options like extending pipes become a little bit more difficult with connection points on. So for certainly a culvert and channel system, I would say the option to turn them off is there, and you may as well, there's no real benefit in having connection points. But if I look at a node like this one, they're not going to build it like that, with the pipe just spread on the corner of the node like that. Similarly, up here, I'll take the actual labels off for the moment and just show the network. They're not going to build that. But if I turn on use node connection points, and I'll just jump onto this node, as soon as you turn on the use node connection points and hit set node details, it actually shifts all of the pipes connected to rectangular nodes, especially so that they fit onto the most appropriate wall of the rectangle in the midpoint of the wall there. So it depends on the level of detail. Traditionally, I suppose all of the pipes just intersected through the center of the node, but as the industry progresses, we're getting requiring more and more detailed models. It does have an effect on your locating crossing services and all of that sort of thing, because you're shifting the location of the pipe ever so slightly. I will go into this, and in fact this other related tick box over here, use link end-to-end length, in more detail in subsequent episodes, because in the next episode at least, one of the things that we're going to focus on is, well, we've placed our nodes pretty accurately along the curb, but laterally they're not placed in the correct spot yet. We need to establish a link to our road design here, and it's a bit like a commutator with a superalignment, the way it links to another string there. Similar sort of concept, I suppose, in the network editor. But once we've established that link, we'll be able to locate and move all of our nodes to be to the millimeter exactly where they're supposed to be built. So that's something for episode 3 as well.
Great, thank you, Owen. And sorry to those attendees whose questions we couldn't get to live. Owen, I'll email you through the rest of these questions shortly. The recording of today's webinar will be available in coming days through the webinars page on our website and on our 12D Model YouTube channel. We'll also email the link out to all registrants, and I might include a link to episode 1 in that email as well, because we've had some requests for that, and that'll keep everyone up to date. So in the meantime, you can keep an eye on our emails and social media for details of future webinars, and of course details of our 2020 Tech Forum, which is coming up in August. We've still got the early bird discount open on that. That's going to be till the 15th of May, so it's a great time to start getting organised towards that one. And if you need to contact us in the meantime, we'll pop some contact details on the screen. That concludes our presentation for today. Thank you all for attending, and we hope to see you at future webinars.